Today, overall, is a unique opportunity to bring together so many different people with a common purpose. But we're going to really focus on innovation of all kinds in this next discussion. High-tech innovation, low-tech innovation, new vaccines coming through, and how they're going to be delivered. And remember, there are still 1.5 million children dying every year from diseases that could be prevented. There is some remarkable and groundbreaking work that's being done in research and development, and this is your chance to hear about it. So as before, we're going to hear from each of our panelists in turn, and then we'll be able to broaden out the discussion and get all of your questions and comments on board. So, a warm welcome to all of my panel for this discussion. I'm going to start right here with Seth Berkley and the Gavi Alliance, which, as I think most of you know, is the group that links up stakeholders in vaccination right across the world and has a particular emphasis on getting new vaccines to the developing world. It's made huge strides, I think it's fair to say, in the 13 years since it was established, and its CEO is Seth Berkley.
Thank you so much. And of course, all of you know how passionate I am about the power of vaccines and getting these amazing tools to the children. There are many innovations that Gavi has to put on the table, but I thought I would pick 3 of them to talk about. The first is actually the fact that it's a partnership and the fact that we're bringing together industry, both from the developed and developing countries, along with civil society, along with research institutions, UN organizations, to go ahead and work on this problem. We try not to duplicate, we try to supplement and work with, and together as an alliance, we're able to do more than we would do individually. So that's, I think, a really powerful and important innovation. Second one I'd like to talk about is how we take a vaccine and move it forward. Pneumonia is one of the greatest killers of children. The pneumococcal vaccine initially didn't work in children. Then when the technology came, conjugation of it, the initial vaccine had some of the strains, but not all the strains that were important. Donors came together, they created a new mechanism, an advanced market commitment, invested $1.5 billion, had a target product profile that included the strains of the developing world, and lo and behold, we have 2 vaccines that meet that profile now, more coming forward, and those vaccines moved very quickly. Mr. Gates put up a graph of how quickly that's moved, but these new vaccines started moving within a few years of their being developed into the developing world, and that's what we're trying to get, is instantaneous launch in the North and South together. We've already taken these vaccines out in 27 countries. This week we had 2 launches, 15 more this year, so they will have gone to 42 countries by the end of this year. So this is a massive acceleration in what we're trying to do. As part of that, we're also trying to modernize the supply chain, working with industry to do that. And again, throughout everything we do, it's trying to bring the best people around the world into tackling these problems. Let me mention third, then, the innovation that's going on in vaccines. Many of this audience, most of this audience will know, but most people, when they think about vaccines, think about little children, and they think about only infectious diseases. We now have our second cancer vaccine. Hepatitis B was the first one. Now we have a vaccine against cervical cancer, kills 275,000 women a year, 85% living in Gavi countries. And when we think about this, today we know that about 30% of cancers in Africa are caused by known infectious agents. So we will discover more vaccines. We will be able to vaccinate against those so-called non-communicable diseases, which is a misnomer, but also someday against diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, which is probably infectious, juvenile diabetes, which is probably infectious. So I think we're going to see the role of vaccines not only dealing with infectious diseases, but also chronic diseases.
So some of those conditions that we know about now that we don't perceive as infectious, our perception of that will change once we have more and more evidence.
Well, the best example of this is, when I trained as a doctor, we used to think of stomach ulcer as being a disease caused by only excess acid and problems, and we treated it with antacids. It turns out to be an infectious disease, and the guy who invented it wasn't believed. He actually drank the agent himself and proved that that agent, he ultimately got the Nobel Prize, but he proved that that agent was it, and eventually we'll have a vaccine against that Helicobacter pylori as well. So I think that's the type of excitement and innovation we can talk about in the future. But first, let's get the great vaccines we have today out to every child in the world.
Yeah. Now, the founding executive secretary of Gavi was Tore Godal, who's sitting right there, who is today the Norwegian Prime Minister's special advisor on global health. And I know Norway has done a huge amount for causes like polio and other vaccination right around the world for some time.
So thank you very much. First of all, I bring my greetings from Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg, who many of you know is very dedicated to the area of vaccines and vaccination. My second point is, and it's with great pleasure to announce that Norway is proceeding with plans to increase its contribution to the new plan of polio eradication to $40 million in 2014, and we have then a strong commitment to continue supporting that initiative for the following 5 years. Of course, as we heard from the UK earlier today, that is dependent on satisfactory progress, and we see this new plan as a radical departure from previous polio eradication plans because of its strong emphasis on routine immunization and introduction of killed polio vaccine to make a comprehensive transition into a polio-free world. As a donor, Norway is supportive of global health and also very much of innovation. Just since the UK gave some figures, we are committed to 1% of our gross national product for aid. And this year, global health was the big winner by an increase of 36%. And why? Because of one thing: we can show results. And we see a dramatic change in Norway away from more budget support to more support to programs, alliances that can show results. As a magnitude, just to tell you that we are doubling our contribution to Gavi by 2015, and together with the new commitment, every citizen in Norway is providing $44 to immunization. So that means each citizen of Norway is adopting one child for full immunization.
With the prices coming down.
Right. I added, so you know, the kind of the infrastructure support there. So that is very privileged to be in such a position, and we are also this year doubling our support to research and development, and our strategy in relation to research and development is to support Norwegian scientists with international scientists primarily, and then to link up with companies and more advanced development activities in middle-income countries like India, in order to have the opportunity to actually, when we develop a vaccine, that it will be at a very low cost. So that is our overall strategy here. We are committed to 0.01% of our gross national product for R&D. We are very committed to innovation, and as you know from the Old Testament, it is said that without vision people perish, and we say that without innovation programs and alliances perish.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the pledge that Norway has made today towards the global polio eradication plan. Now, let's hear next about the NGO perspective, and particularly about what the NGO VillageReach has been doing in Mozambique. Mozambique is a country that has made significant and notable advances on vaccination in recent years, and Leah Hasselback manages VillageReach's national vaccine distribution in Mozambique. Leah.
Okay, thank you. 2 weeks ago, yesterday, I watched the first doses of the pneumococcal vaccine being distributed to children in Mozambique. This was very exciting, and the people of Mozambique are thrilled that their children will benefit from all the hard work that's been done globally to get the vaccine to the country. But with new opportunities come new challenges. The pipeline for new vaccines has expanded greatly at the global level, but at the lower levels in countries, to reach those children, the vaccines need to be delivered across that very difficult last mile. A funnel effect is occurring now where billions of dollars of investment in new vaccine innovation are piling up because the countries don't have the systems and the capacity to deliver those new vaccines. We're seeing this now. We're seeing this today in Mozambique with that new pneumococcal vaccine. We know what's needed to get the vaccine out there. We know we need streamlined logistics systems. We need dependable cold chain. We need accurate information systems to measure system progress. We need public-private partnerships to leverage the innovative capacity of the private sector and the cost efficiency of the private sector. We need well-trained, motivated health workers. And of course, we need parents who understand and demand the promise of those new vaccines. While greater resources are required, much of the needed changes can come about through innovation. But innovation is contextual. Systems that could work in Europe, in the United States, here in Abu Dhabi, may not work in very, very different environments where resources, infrastructure, and capacity are scarce. Too often we design systems by sitting in rooms like this based on what we think should be instead of what can be given the local context. From many years of experience working at the lower levels of the health system in Mozambique and other countries, we've learned that system design must recognize the locally available capacity, resources, infrastructure. And by working with local Ministry of Health officials to develop and field test new approaches through a continuous process of measuring performance and then refining based on results, we've learned that we've designed systems that can achieve significantly greater coverage rates in the hardest to reach areas at significantly reduced cost to governments. To deliver the promise of vaccines to the final 20% of children who are currently being missed, we need to start at the last mile with an understanding of what can work given the local context, and then build systems that will reach those final 20% of children. Thank you.
Thank you, and hopefully in the discussion we can hear more about how you're making this, part of making this happen in Mozambique. Now, clearly the global pharmaceutical industry is really important to innovation, and its involvement is crucial in the years ahead. And one of the companies that's done a lot of work on vaccines, as you'll know, is Sanofi. Michael Watson is the Vice President of Global Vaccination Policy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, innovation is clearly a many-headed beast, and there are literally hundreds of opportunities for innovation if we look from the discovery of vaccines through to how they actually work, through to how we produce them. And there are as many, if not more, innovations to be had in terms of how we procure, how we store, how we supply, how we afford vaccines. So with so many potential innovations on the table, we have to be selective, we have to be focused, we have to prioritize, and we have to do that really by thinking about the need. What are the urgent needs? What are the biggest needs? We have to think about the timing. When is that need for? And we need to think about the feasibility, of course. If there's a need for tomorrow and it's going to take 10 years to develop, that's not going to work. Polio is an interesting case study in innovation because to the outside world, we talk about the polio vaccine. But of course, it's 3 vaccines in one. And actually, it's a vaccine which has continuously evolved over the last 60 or more years. The first vaccines, as we just heard, being discovered late 40s, early 50s. But the first vaccine actually was an injectable polio vaccine, which was based on an innovation, a study of 1.8 million children in the US, which got that vaccine so urgently needed out in 1955. It took another 8 to 10 years for the oral polio vaccine to come along, and it was at that point realized that oral polio vaccine was going to be the best tool for getting large volumes of affordable vaccines out. And so that's why OPV has been the huge success story that it's been. But then later on, it was realized that actually OPV alone was not going to finish the job, and IPV was going to need to come back. But actually, the IPV that started things wasn't the IPV that was going to do the job later. And actually, in '75, the phone rang in Charles Merrier's office, and it was Jonas Salk on the end of the line. He said, we need to get some people together, we need to produce this IPV in larger volumes, and we need to make it more effective. And the vaccine that we have today results from that collaboration between industry and between the public sector. That innovation is continuing as we move towards the introduction of IPV. People are scaling up, people are looking at the presentations, and of course people are looking at how we can innovate to make sure that that vaccine will be affordable, and that's something that all players in IPV will be involved in. I want to touch then on the future of innovation. What's next? Well, at the moment we're talking about a 5+1 from the end of 2015 onwards. The next step that everybody would love is all vaccines in a single injection, a hexavalent vaccine. And that's something we're working on. And we're innovating there again. That development's being done in India at our Shanta site. Will be produced in India. But of course, that's being done with the experience and the know-how and the expertise that's been established in Europe. At the end of all this innovation is good for polio, but as we've heard repeatedly throughout the day, this is not about polio. This will benefit much more than polio. This will benefit vaccination overall, vaccination systems, and actually health systems overall.
Thank you very much, Michael Watson. Now, there are new regional names coming up in the biopharma and the pharmaceutical industry all the time. And in fact, one of them that's really got up and running within the last few years is based in this part of the world, based in Saudi Arabia, and in fact, in the holy city of Mecca. It is Arabio, and its general manager is Majed Bahatheq.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me give a quick brief about Arabio and our key responsibilities for the years to come. Arabio is an Arabian company formed by a collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. From the private sector, we have 50% from private equity Saudi companies, Raya Company and Tamar Group. It's one of the local distributors. While from the public sector, we have the Islamic Development Bank, we have the Arabian governments under the umbrella of a pharmaceutical company called Acdima, and we have an Egyptian governmental company called Vaxera. So it's a collaboration between private and public sector. That was established Arabio in 2007. By 2010, we signed the first strategic alliance to manufacture Novartis vaccines for the next 20 years. This is a very long-term agreement that would include all the fill and finish activities in our site in Mecca. And by 2011, we started our operation, we launched our products, and it's widely available now in Saudi as well as in the Gulf states, and hopefully we will reach out to the rest of our region. Now, what are the key responsibilities of Arabio? Arabio has identified 3 key responsibilities. The first one is that we want to be at the expectation of our local and regional governments. Whenever there is an outbreak or a pandemic incidence because of mass gathering like Hajj season, for example, we can supply these markets very quickly by allocating some of our production capacity for these markets. Let me give you a couple of examples which happened actually before. In 2000, there was an outbreak of meningitis in Saudi Arabia. And from the time of incidence of that outbreak in the Hajj season until we get the vaccine supplied to do the universal mass vaccination in the Holy Mosque area as well as in Jeddah and Medina, it took actually more than 1.5 years to supply 5 million doses. Saudi Arabia has lost more than 200 people died, plus more than 2,000 people been admitted to intensive care units. In 2006, another incidence of measles outbreak, and it took more than 10 months to get this vaccine supplied by multinational companies. So you cannot get the vaccine quickly unless you have a clear commitment to your community. At international responsibility, Arabio is going to increase its capacity to 150 million doses by 2017. This will allow us actually to allocate again another part or portion of our capacity for Gavi and UNICEF at low cost, hopefully. Nevertheless, Arabio right now has 3 initiatives actually to generate more fund through the Islamic organization country, as well as the IDB and Saudi government, by which we can allocate some of the fund that we can generate from these institutions to support UNICEF and Gavi activities. And finally, at level of research and development, Arabio today has signed a couple of research activities with Sabine Institute as well as with King Faisal Specialist Hospital to address the issue of leishmaniasis and dengue fever, which pandemic actually in our West region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, you've already heard about the front line of what it's like from Leah in a country like Mozambique. And our last panelist is Dr. Aysha Al-Dhaheri, who's from here in the UAE and is a doctor, but has had a first-hand view of vaccination programs in Afghanistan when she's worked with the UAE's International Humanitarian Assistance Program. Dr. Aysha.
Thank you, Mishal. I think I'd like to start with saying that the UAE actually started its peacekeeping and humanitarian aid, including the medical assistance, back in the 1976 in Lebanon. The UAE actually started doing this through the armed forces. Recently, actually, other aid organizations like the Red Crescent actually are taking increasing part in that medical assistance. The UAE continued its commitment to actually be part of the international community to eradicate diseases and actually deliver medical assistance to the less fortunate countries. Initially, this was the curative actually medicine. In the recent years, we focused more on the immunization and vaccination. Reflecting on the previous actually sessions and what I think maybe the greatest innovation in delivery is actually using the presence of the UAE in Afghanistan at the moment, and actually also using the strong ties with the Pakistani government to accomplish, together of course with other organizations, NGOs, Ministry of Public Health, to achieve actually the polio eradication and the elimination or the reduction of the preventable diseases, bringing the under 5 children mortality rate even further down in all those countries. To achieve that, I think we need all the parties to unite, to play a role to do the best, keeping in mind that when coming up with the new vaccines or delivery methodologies, that war zones are actually harder to reach than the hardest to reach poor areas in Africa or in any other places. So the war by itself is a challenge. This is necessitating more innovative solutions to reach our ultimate goal, which is a world free of preventable disease, which I'm looking forward to hear from my other panelist colleagues, their actually innovation that we can use when we are implementing the vaccines on the ground in the harder to reach areas in the war zones. Thank you.
Thank you. So clearly, innovation takes many forms and means many different things, and this is a very broad-ranging discussion. Seth Berkley, I wonder if I could ask you first about, overall, the time frame of getting a vaccine through to someone in a developing country is less now than it was before. Why is that happening? How is that happening?
Well, there's many answers to that question. First of all, the time frame in the past was long. We say 15, 20, but many countries didn't get it at all. So now the fact that they are systematically getting it is important. One, and I think perhaps the most important, is a recognition of this as an issue. And Gavi was started, in essence, to solve that problem. And what Gavi did is it aggregated all of the demand from those countries. So right now, about 65% of the world's birth cohort is supplied by vaccines by Gavi. And so when we come to the pharmaceutical companies then and say, we now have, this is the number of doses we need, and by the way, we can give you reliable forecasts going forward for a period of time, they then can set their production production to be able to meet that goals. And of course, by doing large volume over a long period of time, they also can drive down the costs, which is also critical to sustainability of the effort. So it's really been a policy shift more than anything else. And I think now we also have companies coming in who are no longer saying our goal is to have low volume, high cost, but now they're trying to do very high volume and low cost. And we now, for example, Gavi initially had 1 manufacturer in the developing world. Today we have 5. We've doubled the number of manufacturers working on Gavi vaccines. We've heard even on the panel of others coming in, and so it really has shifted the whole mindset.
Okay, so I wonder then, Michael Watson, how much difference did that kind of approach make to a company like yours? Were you, before that, not able to say, well, we can manufacture this because we know there's enough demand for it from countries A, B, C, D, and E?
Yeah, Gavi's had an enormous impact at 2 levels. Firstly, in 2000, when there was a clear push to get out and vaccinate all the kids in the world, vaccines weren't being developed with that intent in mind. And so the costs, the scale, the target product profile didn't fit that need. And so they've allowed us through this transition period to actually respond to that, given us warning, allowed us to scale things up. But what we've done now with the confidence that those vaccines are going to be rolled out is actually the model's now starting to overtake the old model, and there will soon be vaccines which will first be used in the endemic low-income countries. So when you look at vaccines like malaria, like dengue, like the hexavalent vaccine we talked about, they're destined for the low-income countries.
Because that is where the demand is.
Because the certainty of demand is there with Gavi, and that allows us to invest now in the long term to develop vaccines for those.
Tora Godal, this has been one of the really, brilliant innovations in this area in the last few years. Then, is this the model going forward? Is this kind of collaboration between on the Gavi model? Does this remain the future then?
This model is actually being expanded. I just want to add 2 specific aspects of this model. One is that this is based on the principle of a sustainable business model. So you have to accept this is and should be a win-win situation. So that is very important. And then the other aspect of it is that it is an acceptance and adoption of a differential price system in which the poorest countries get the best price, in this case Gavi, and then it's higher prices for middle income and for OECD countries. So these are 2 additional aspects of it that is fundamental.
But it's not necessarily something that delivers, it's not necessarily a model that delivers fast, right? Majed, Bahatheq, this is the point you were making, that you can do something different in this part of the world.
Well, actually, definitely by having the technology. Actually, if you look into the vaccine industry in particular, to have a new company well established, you have 4 major obstacles or challenges, I would say. The limitation on know-how, how you can get the know-how. I mean, I think in order to have the vaccine accessible to most poorest countries, you need to have more and more vaccine companies at local and regional level. This needs to be encouraged by the multinational companies, the global community, Gavi, in order to have a diversified suppliers of vaccines. So know-how limitation is one issue. The second issue, actually, the risk on the batch failure and quality assurance requirements, actually, which make the vaccine very delicate and difficult to do. The level of investment in vaccine industry is almost double the level of investment for conventional pharmaceutical industry. So it carries so much risk. And regulatory requirements is quite enormous compared to the other conventional pharmaceutical industry. Now, in order to reach the level at which we can encourage small companies to make more vaccines available at affordable prices, you need this kind of relationship between the public sector and the private sector, as well as long-term agreements and partnership. As soon as you can have such a partnership, you can allocate part of your production capacity for the other world where they need actually at subsidized low cost.
Well, it's clear that there's some great work going on in this area. Leah Hasselback, I wonder if you could tell us more then about Mozambique, because we've been talking up till now about the vaccines in production, getting them to the countries. The point you were making is that even when they get to a country like Mozambique, they can pile up, literally pile up, unused.
Right. So I can give you one example of what we've done in Mozambique. And we saw last night that Margarita Matzine was highlighted as the Vaccine Innovation Award winner, and she deserves big credit for work on this because she works on this system. But essentially what we've done with vaccine distribution in Mozambique is we sat at the health center level where the vaccines are used, and we said, they're not getting here. We know they have them in Maputo at the capital level. We know they have them at the provinces, but they don't have them here at the health center, which means the children aren't getting them. And why don't they have them? They don't have them because they don't have transportation. They don't have funds for per diems or for fuel. Things like that were the very basic building blocks were missing. And so we said, okay, how could we get them there within this limited resource and capacity context? And we said, if we put teams at a province level whose sole responsibility was then to distribute the vaccines to all the health centers and all the districts every month, we need fewer resources and we have a more reliable system in which to distribute those vaccines. And through that work, we did see a decrease in stockouts of vaccines from 80% down to less than 1%. Stacked out, and we achieved coverage rates of 95% in the first province where we did this. 95% is higher than even many developing countries.
Wow. Presumably, Seth Berkley, there must be other countries in the world which maybe are facing exactly what Mozambique used to, where, you know, through your efforts, vaccines are getting there, and then they're not getting to the people that need them.
Well, one of the things you look for is something called positive deviancy. So in a situation where it's tough, why do some groups do well? And then you study them. And it's interesting because the second part of the story she didn't have time to tell was they came up with this great policy intervention, and then it was decided not to take that to national scale for other reasons. And so even though they got this very high coverage levels, other parts of the country didn't. And it was only through a period of time and more engagement that ultimately they decided they would expand it more. And so we know how to do it. There's lots of experiences. The challenge is getting adoption locally, and that's part of selling it. Now, one of the things we try to do for sustainability is we charge everybody who's getting Gavi vaccines something. The very poor countries pay a little bit. As countries get wealthier, they pay more. And then when they graduate, when they get rich enough, the idea is that the price has been dropping through the market shaping effort so that they will be able to have the amount of money to afford that. And by doing that and by engaging the Ministry of Finance at the beginning, the Ministry of Planning, they begin to take seriously vaccines and have it in their budget, a budget line item, which may be very small at the beginning, but grows over time. And that allows the type of policy dialogue that is critical. Because normally the Ministry of Health may be a low priority sector.
Yes.
Ministry of Finance always is a high priority. If you can get them discussing this early, the president, that's really important.
Interesting. Dr. Aysha, what was your experience in Afghanistan, and how did it change your perception of what needs to be done in a country like that?
Okay. It's quite interesting, actually, experience, especially working with other countries, NGOs and other also forces that they are trying to help.
Do you mind just moving the microphone a bit closer to you? Yeah, thank you.
Afghanistan is a diverse country with actually a mixture of all the challenges that you can even, think about. You have easier places like in the north, where, areas like Kabul are less challenging than the south, provinces like Helmand and Kabul. So the way that you actually would like to provide the medical assistance and the vaccination should differ according to the provinces. People, in background, for example, they come willingly to the Korean hospital and to the Egyptian hospital to get treatment and to get actually the help that they need. Well, actually, in provinces where security is less than other provinces, you will have to reach for them. You really have to go and reach for them. And without actually the protection from the troops, it's almost impossible because of the mines, that are implemented all over, planted all over the country. So, for the northern, let's say, provinces, I think what is missing is the awareness. They should really, and I think they are doing a great job, because the infant mortality and the child under 5 mortality actually have decreased over the years. The south thing, actually, I think we'll have to come up with innovative, let's say, delivery systems, where I think, something like the nano patch or the micro injections, having 2 or 3, 6, vaccines all together, like, the things that they are working on, is something that will ease the delivery of those vaccines. When you are actually going through those insecure areas, then you are not going to be able, and there is also no power supply, so even if you have a fridge which will work, even if there is an interruption in electricity, is not going to be actually able to work. You'll have to make it as smaller as possible, and we'll have also to make it, heat stable as much as possible.
Yes.
And educate.
This is so interesting, because then I want to talk about the product end of things, and particularly hear from the manufacturers on, what you've got for us in the pipeline on this kind of thing. Tora Godal.
On the supply side, and to reach people, I think traditionally we think about it as a push system. You push things down. The big change that we are now seeing is that you are more and more seeing a pull system, by which health workers as well as mother are giving incentives for the health workers for then actually delivering the vaccines. So they want to have the vaccines. They're just not sitting passively to wait them to come. And mothers in other areas, but also in vaccination, are giving rewards if they bring the children to be vaccinated. And in that way, you are creating a pool which is then very important in order to strengthen the whole chain from the port to the
So from a donor
children.
perspective, spending money on those kinds of incentives is worth it.
Oh, this is what we are together with Britain spending $500 million in collaboration with the World Bank to basically reform the health system, to incentivize the system, and to link our investments to results rather than to basically to inputs. And this is why we are increasing in global health in Norway, is because we can document results, and results. And that is why Gavi exists today. If it had shown results, it would have disappeared after 5 years.
Okay. Michael Watson, can I ask you just about a couple of those innovations that Dr. Aysha mentioned? Heat-stable, nano patches, micro-injections. I mean, how many of these are, how far are these things in progress, and how effective are they?
So I think all the themes we've heard are important in thinking about it. First of all, vaccines take a long time to develop. So to develop a whole new heat-stable technology is going to require a decent amount of time, and there needs to be the demand there. If the demand's there, then it'll start to happen.
But demand is there, right, in countries which have power shortages? And
So the demand, and so there are some things we can do though quickly. So some of the things that people are doing now is looking at existing vaccines and saying, well, okay, when's the vulnerable time? The vulnerable time is at the end of the supply chain. Let's have a look at that vaccine and see how stable it is at a higher temperature. And what we're seeing, for instance, is that vaccines, recently the meningitis A conjugate was licensed to be held out of the cold chain for up to 4 days. So that means that vulnerable bit is now more assured. We're doing work on other vaccines to look and see how many days we can keep vaccines like yellow fever, our cholera vaccine, out of the cold chain at the end. So that's something we can do quickly. In terms of making the big step into a heat-stable vaccine, there are technologies out there. It's then down to demand and the cost of that innovation, and that cost both in terms of time and money. Okay,
and the needle-free systems, which would be very welcome in many countries?
Again, there are technologies out there. One of the things we have to always bear in mind with innovation is that it's tempting to think about the new things. Actually, needles are pretty good to get something from the outside to the inside without touching anything in between the two. And so, yes, there are technologies out there, but is the demand really there? And if it is there, then those can be developed.
Okay, Majed, Bahatheq.
Well, we know that there is a tremendous effort actually to have needleless vaccine, either through batches or through a very little tiny needle. With regard to the batches, there is a lot of work actually since more than 4 years now with some of the machine manufacturers like Ullman and Bosch, for example. But again, they need to test it at clinical trial basis to understand how much of the vaccine required to be absorbed by the bloodstream and to give the same efficacy similar to the injection normal traditional approach. Nevertheless, there is another obstacle by the cost of that new route of administration. Initially, a single dose of syringe, it costs around just 5-6 cents for either vial or even up to 10 to 15 cents for a refill syringe. Now, if you look at a scale of that kind of batch, so far we're talking about nearly $3 for a batch. So that's kind of limitation. And again, as my colleague has said, we are looking at, we need to estimate the demand that we are talking about, how we can bring the price down, and to do the necessary clinical trial to ensure that these new administration routes are feasible and effective and safe.
Okay. Leah Hasselback, I wonder, with your experience in Mozambique, what are the innovations that, you sit and say, I really wish one of the drug companies would give us this, would come up with, what is the innovation that would make a big difference? Because I know you spend a lot of time thinking about the logistics, but, is there something that you think, gosh, if we had this kind of, vaccine that would last for X many days, it would make such a huge difference?
I'd think bigger than that and think of a vaccine in a drone that transports itself to a health center. Can we do that? No, I think more realistic technologies maybe, vaccines outside of the cold chain would be a huge improvement. As small as possible so that you can use leverage as much existing transportation capacity as possible, and as simple as possible. When I hear about some things like certain vaccines that can be taken out of the cold chain for a certain amount of time, and it's pretty complicated when you get down to that last level and you have very basic health workers.
Yeah, because you've got to explain that to everyone.
Exactly. When you know they all have to be between 2 and 8 degrees, okay, that's fairly simple. But it starts to get more complicated when you change that up. It's still worth going there. It's still worth trying that. But keeping it simple, keeping it outside the cold chain would be huge.
Okay, right. Well, I'm sure some of you have questions, and as before, we've got microphones in the room. Yes, gentlemen here, and anyone else want to raise their hand now? We'll come. Okay, we'll go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I have a question from my friend from Saudi Arabia. I listened with interest the production unit in Mecca. Are you producing pentavalent vaccine or IPV or OPV?
Yes, we do manufacture a pentavalent vaccine, and we have a plan to manufacture injectable polio at large scale. Hopefully, we will have kind of collaboration with our colleague from Gavi and UNICEF. We have also measles, rubella, and MMR in the plan.
Are you based in Mecca?
In Mecca,
but with the intention of appealing particularly to the Muslim world?
Well, there is no decision behind this, actually. It just came by chance, having the plant in Mecca. And from an environmental point of view, the right place for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to have a vaccine plant has been identified to be in Mecca. But it's a great opportunity for Arabio to have the vaccine out of our place whenever there is any cultural or religious limitation to take the vaccine from any other part of the world.
I just wonder if you think that is going to make a difference because already today we've talked about some of the cultural and religious barriers that can exist. Seth, Berkley, is that something that you think, adds a different dimension to what's available on the market?
Well, of course, having the name Mecca associated with anything will matter so much to, Islamic populations. The critical thing we have to say is that vaccines are efficacious or not, they're safe or not, and what we don't want is have different classes of vaccines. But, I suspect that that brand will matter.
Because do you market your vaccines as halal? Is that part of what you say?
Well, we are not trying to claim our vaccine out of Mecca as halal. But again, we know that some part of the world, in Islamic countries, they are concerned about that, to have the vaccine derivative during the method of manufacture is out of any port derivative. So you might claim it halal for some part of the world whenever needed.
Dr. Aysha, what did people say to you in Afghanistan when you met them about their perception of vaccination? How much of an issue was it?
The halal issue, you mean?
Yes, and in general, the sort of perception in that part of the world.
It's not an issue actually. Not actually in the minds of the people that we've met. Their biggest fear and issue and concern is for the health of their children, and trying to keep the children from death, because if you have 1 or 2 in every 5 children dying before they reach the age of 5, then you are really not concerned whether what is the source of the vaccination. You just want the treatment. So this is the general perception. Saving life is most important.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just looking out in that direction in case I see anyone.
One comment on innovation.
Yeah.
When you're talking about Afghanistan, one of the exciting things that was done, given the difficulties in reaching these areas you mentioned, is that the government actually contracts with civil society directly to get the vaccines out. And the Minister of Health from Afghanistan, who was here earlier, was talking about how helpful that was to get coverage up and ultimately to drive down, child deaths.
Thank you. Question right there.
Thank you. Actually, more of a comment on this issue of halal vaccine. And I think it's very important that we have more manufacturers and more countries become more self-sufficient and make sure that vaccine is available on time. And those are very important driving factors, as are the market issues. But I think from a program perspective, and as we've struggled across the world in many communities, I think the message of the global immunization community should be that all vaccines are halal, regardless of where they are produced, because that would be a very dangerous road to go down to if we start segmenting vaccines like that. So I think our collective message, as the OIC in its statements has actually said, that vaccines are halal and should be, and it's actually an obligation of parents to protect their children. Thank you.
Which is, I think, the point you were making earlier, Seth, that is the Dr. Aysha, that what you do for your health is always something that is advisable and necessary.
Yeah, according to Islam, actually, any means of treatment is really halal.
Further questions? Oh. Okay, yes. Great. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's two parts of a question. One part is for the pharma. We had noticed on the last decade, between 2001 and 2011, an increase in the prices of vaccines by 2,700%, which is quite enormous. So how far this price can be brought down? The second question for Gavi, with regard to the graduation from Gavi donor support program for countries. This will end on a huge bill landing on the table of these countries. I will give the example of Honduras. In 2001, Honduras paid $1.43 of a dollar for vaccines, and this is Gavi support price. In 2015, when Honduras will graduate from Gavi program, it will have to pay $15.50 of a dollar for the vaccines. The situation of Honduras is not unique. In 2015, other 16 countries will graduate as well. How this will affect the sustainability of vaccination? Thank you.
Seth Berkley, are those figures accurate?
The first figure actually isn't accurate. I know where that comes from, but the point is correct, which is we originally started with 6 vaccines. They were vaccines that were old, they were mass-produced, they were very inexpensive. We've since then doubled the number of vaccines, added vaccines against the largest killers of children, and they're complex new vaccine. The pneumococcal vaccine has either 13 different strains or 10 different strains in it. That's like giving 13 vaccines and 10 different vaccines, and that's only one of the new vaccines. So there's no question they are going to be more expensive. Now, of course, the prices are dropping with scale-up, but we're never going to get down to the $1 level. What's important about the way to think about this is that when countries are very poor, countries would have to spend a very large percentage of their income on these vaccines, 6, 7, 8, 10%. By the time a country graduates from Gavi, that is, their income is greater than $1,550, on average, the government would have to spend 0.6% of their health budget on vaccines for their children. And we think that is a reasonable amount for countries to spend.
Do you review this on a regular
Absolutely.
basis, the benchmarks that you've come up with for when you graduate?
That's why it's so important that ministries of finance are engaged, because it's not an issue of do they have the money. I've just told you it's 0.6% of the health budget. The issue is, are they willing to spend it on vaccines? And that's what we have to do. Our graduating threshold gets adjusted based upon inflation rates, but one of the things that the board has said quite clearly is we should focus on the poorest countries, because wealthier countries they may have poor people, but they have the ability to pay. It's more of a policy issue, whereas the very poor countries just do not have the amounts of money.
Tori Godal, is it possible to think then about innovation on this Gavi model to address some of the criticism that does exist?
First of all, I think fundamentally we are in a very rapid transition in the world. The biggest economic growth we now see in the poorest countries, and as you know, the economic situation in the richer countries is stagnating, which means that the developing countries, as they grow and grow out of the poorest bracket, they need to increasingly pay for their own vaccines and so on. So that's why the focus on the poorest countries will be very important from a donor point of view. I think what Gavi is doing in relation to that specific issue here is that countries that are graduating are able to keep the prices at a lower level for some time, so that they first graduate, but then they don't get to have the higher prices immediately, but stay there for some years.
And let me just say that last week we announced a price reduction for the pentavalent vaccine. The price when that was introduced, now just 12, 13 years ago, was $3.50. Biological E, whose CEO is here, announced a price point of $1.19. That's the type of reduction we're looking for.
Majed, Bahatheq.
I just want to add a little comment here. For vaccine prices, it's a strategic commodity at which it's subject to supply and demand. And as long as we can maintain that equilibrium in the right place, maintaining a demand very clear over the next few years, so that would encourage the manufacturer to put some production in place and to put their plan in action to produce more and bring the price down. Secondly, diversification of the suppliers. The more suppliers coming to the market, the better situation at which we subsidize or we diversify our suppliers. So in case something goes wrong with one of the major suppliers for any essential vaccine like polio or penta or whatever, then you have your own contingency plan or a backup plan by which you can maintain the price as is and not to go further again back because of the limitation on supply. That's
Michael.
And I think it's fair to say that whilst the total amount being spent on vaccination has gone up, the cost of vaccines has gone down, often very dramatically. And I think we have to be very careful about this idea of price. Of course, price as a number is meaningless. Price is a number that should always be smaller. That's not the point. When we go and buy something in a shop and we're deciding how much we're going to pay, we're saying, well, we look at the quality, we look at the reliability, we look at the innovation that we're buying, and we need to think about that for vaccines as well. And when we talk about wanting innovations for the future, those innovations won't come for free. And so we need to think about quality, we need to think about reliability, we need to think about future innovation. And I think, yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I would have let you finish your sentence and your thought, you know. But well, thank you very much. We are out of time. We're getting towards the end of the day. There's one more panel discussion after the tea break, and also Adi Adabetan will be making his closing remarks. So I'd like to close by asking you to thank all my panelists, and thank you also for taking part. Thank you.